Things just took a surprising turn surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs as reports and rumors continue to swirl, but a brand new report has dropped surrounding one particular player that is very intriguing. I'm going to break that down and discuss what this means, as well as a few other updates as Brad Treliving prepares for more moves following what was a very unexpected Dakota Joshua trade. But before you do it all, folks, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. But 71% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed. You guys have been absolute beasts with the support, so thank you guys for that as we're on the road to, of course, the big goal of 25,000 subscribers and the bigger goal of 30,000. There's a lot to go over today, and a new report has dropped surrounding a player that has become available on the trade market a little bit out of nowhere. And of course, this has fueled speculation. It's fueled a lot of reports here. And as we're seeing from this Toronto Maple Leafs team, Brad Treliving is not afraid to completely just retool, rejig this roster. And it all started, with the Michelli trade, but you can look at it now. We're going to use this as context before we dive into the report here. Let's look at the Maple Leafs' best possible lineup as of now. And of course, we'll dive into that in a little bit. But looking at who they have, what their cap space is, $2.9 million in projected cap space. But David Kampf trade, Nick Robertson trade, Calle Jarnkrok trade, also Bobby McMann, his future is up in the air. And then a brand new report has dropped revealing an interesting player who has officially requested a trade. Darius, this is an interesting one. A Blue Jackets Leafs trade could be on the horizon here. And yes, it is a bottom six player, but with the way, and we'll dive into it here, with the way that Brad Treliving is completely reforming this team, this makes some sense given the cap space that, of course, the Columbus Blue Jackets have.
Yeah, they have a ton of cap space that they can, weaponize for themselves. And obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs can kind of take advantage of that too if they were to make this trade work. Now, on the outside, looking in, if you look at the roster right now, the way it is right now, this doesn't really make that much sense. You still have McMahon down there. Kampf, Jarnkrok, they're still on the team. They haven't been moved yet, but we're assuming that they're going to be moved. So it doesn't really make sense in that way. Obviously, Nick Robertson is still technically a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs as an RFA, but maybe there's a Nick Robertson for Chinakhov, swap here. I think that could be something that the Leafs could at least explore. Robertson, if he does resign, is going to be making probably over $1 million. So for $1 million more, you get a guy who's a half a point a game player in the NHL. He has had some injury troubles and it kept him out of the lineup for a significant amount of time last season. But this is a guy that, listen, it's not your top six answer again. And you can't take, can he play in a top six? Maybe with his point production, right? Maybe a top six around the league, but you can't take another flyer and try something again with another player. You're already doing that with Michelli. There's a real possibility that goes south, right? I don't think it will, but you can't take two flyers, right? The Leafs have to make some moves to make sure that they're still a contender, of course. So I don't think this would be the top six move, but it's pretty interesting. And I think that, with acquiring Dakota Joshua, the Leafs are going to completely rethink their bottom six. I don't even know, and I brought it up in a video we did yesterday, Bobby McMann, I'm not even sure they're too high on him anymore because he's 29. He's going to be 30 at the end of his contract when it expires. And he does look good at times, but the consistency thing is an issue, and he did absolutely nothing in the playoffs. Not to say that Chinakhov is going to, but maybe it's something they take a look at. You move out a couple players, you free up some salary cap space, you add a guy like this to your third line, and then you go out and you find your top line wing with the salary cap that you freed up. So I feel like they're completely rethinking the entire lineup, honestly, at this point, because Lawton's going to be your fourth line center, I think, moving forward. That's much different than what it was last year. So I think it's an interesting idea, a lot of moving parts. And I do wonder if, for Columbus, since they know they have to trade him, if they want some value in maybe a Nick Robertson, right? I wouldn't mind hanging on to Nick Robertson either, but this could make some sense.
Yeah, and of course, Chinakhov requested a trade himself. Very good advanced analytics. We'll dive into his stats here. He's an elite goal scorer, obviously, in his limited sample size, and that's something that's where it makes sense. The Leafs, you look at it there, they're bottom six. They don't have a ton of goal scoring. Obviously, Bobby McMann, in theory, was for a while, but no one else has the goal scoring, capabilities that a guy like Chinakhov would, and it would fit perfectly into the team. Now, of course, I know you're probably all saying it's another bottom six guy. This would be under the assumption that Kampf, Robertson, Jarnkrok, two of those three are going to get traded, which means, of course, you had to fill out the roster elsewhere. But you look at his goal scoring ability, 16 goals in 53 games, and then last year, 7 goals in 30 games, which is still an okay pace. But you look at the advanced analytics here, 89th percentile in goals. Like, he has good advanced analytics, and that's something that we've seen countless times with teams that, Columbus is a really weird team, coaching changes all the time, up and down roster. If you put them in a steady group with that bottom six, I would love it in replace of where Jarnkrok is right here on that third line. McMahon, Roy, Nicholas Raw, and Chinakhov. it makes things very interesting there. And let's look at the cap hit. Again, he's on the last year of his deal. He'll be an RFA, so if they want to keep him around, they could. I think the Robertson swap probably makes some sense. I mean, you're trading upside for upside in theory, like limited upside for limited upside. And the Leafs would have leverage here. Of course, other teams are going to be interested. He requested a trade. He's not going to start next season, we would assume, with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And their cap space is huge. So maybe this becomes a bigger deal where they take on a David Kampf, and, maybe the Leafs throw some sort of pick in. So they get rid of the David Kampf contract and they get rid of, Nick Robertson or whatever it ends up being, and they get Chinakhov back. There is a framework here that makes a lot of sense, especially given what Brad Treliving has done. And it becomes even more likely in my mind, given the other moves that he's made, specifically acquiring Michelli, acquiring Dakota Joshua, and things like that. He's clearly not afraid to go after these, not lower tier guys, but maybe the B tier guys in the NHL.
Yeah, and you made a good point. The Columbus Blue Jackets have a ton of salary cap space, so you can make this into a much bigger trade. Maybe you include, some draft picks if you want, but you can include maybe not both of, but one of David Kampf or Calle Jarnkrok. Get off of that salary. You bring in, obviously, Chinakhov. It kind of cancels out in that way. And then depending on who you're moving out, of course, but kind of cancels out in that way. And then adding him to the lineup could make some sense. Ultimately, I think that you would have to completely reconfigure your entire idea of what you're thinking of your bottom six is going to look like going into the year, because McMahon might have to go. You're going to have to make the salary cap work. And there have been some other reports, and we're going to have another video on it, that the Leafs are looking for somebody in the top six in like the $6 million range. I don't know what that means. I don't know. There's not too many guys out there that even make that to play in a top six role. So that's pretty interesting too. We're going to have another video on that, but you're going to have to free up some cap in doing a move like this. So I think that, Brad Treliving could possibly make the call. This guy's not a small player either, like 6'1", right? Not the smallest guy. I know that you might be giving up some size if you move off of, let's say, a Bobby McMahon or something like that, but certainly not with the Nick Robertson, and his future is unclear right now. It sounds like they could come to an agreement. Nick Robertson could end up staying in the Toronto Maple Leaf system, but I think that a team like Columbus wouldn't mind a Nick Robertson either. So it could make a lot of sense in that way. And then Chinakhov, again, you're trading for that hopeful upside that he could bring to a lineup, at least on the third line, let's say, and continue to add, some identity to that line, some scoring to that line, because the Leafs are trying to get heavier. They're trying to get tougher, of course. We saw that with Dakota Joshua, but he can score as well. That's the thing in the playoffs, and chip in for these goals. And I think that Chinakhov can do. So ultimately, I don't think they're going to, trade for this player. I think it's something that they might kick tires on. I feel like another team might have something better to offer to the Columbus Blue Jackets, because the Leafs still have a lot of moving parts and have to move out some salary. But the biggest thing with this move, I think, or, any move that's coming up here, is I think they're actually completely rethinking what the bottom six is going to look like on this team. I don't think Jarnkrok's going to start the season out as a Leaf. Same with David Kampf. And I do really, really wonder about Bobby McMahon at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me, a month ago, this probably wouldn't have made a ton of sense, given the fact that they're trading everyone left and right, it seems, regarding not players they're giving up, just draft picks, but completely rehauling the bottom six. Moves are coming, and it's going to be interesting to see how things work. And a lot of this will depend on what they do with Calle Jarnkrok, David Kampf, and, of course, Nick Robertson. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. See you guys later.